All right. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. If you're joining us on Facebook, if you are watching this after the fact, still thank you for joining us and taking the time to do so. My name is Olivia Gustafson, and I'm a program officer for the Fulbright Program for the Middle East and North Africa. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues Teresa Kozelka and Brenda Castine, who will be answering questions about the Fulbright Foreign Student Program application particularly. Before we get started, I wanted to let any viewers know that you can ask questions in the comments of the event, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can in the next hour. So with that, let's get started. So Teresa and Brenda, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Brenda Castine. I'm a program officer here at AMIDEAST in Washington, D.C. I work with students from Lebanon and Egypt.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Kozelka. I'm a program manager with the Fulbright team at AMIDEAST, and I work with students from the UAE and Bahrain.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, both of you, and for helping us answer some of these frequently asked questions that we receive from applicants. So we hope that you will find this to be helpful and informative. We're going to start with some advanced questions that we received from the audience. I know on our social media a couple days ago, we posted a link for you to submit some, pre-prepared questions. So we're going to start out with those, and I'm going to go ahead and ask some of those to my fellow colleagues. Brenda, I took the GRE test last December and scored 300.5 out of 346. Will I have to retake it if my application will be processed for this phase?
So no, the GRE nor the GMAT are required at this phase in the application. Once the applications have been processed and if you are selected for nomination, then at that time you will be able to retake the GRE if you wish to improve your score.
Yeah, absolutely. You will have another chance if you proceed to the process of nomination. All right, Teresa, how many words do you require for the motivation letter or the personal statement?
Yeah, your personal statement can be up to 600 words in length. We will go ahead and discuss this more in depth later on in the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, for our, the questions you submitted before the live, should I attach reference letters based on academic or professional knowledge? That's a great question.
That is a great question. And it's really going to depend on your field of study, as well as who you think you're going to be able to get stronger recommendations from. So STEM fields or fields that have you're definitely going to need to write a thesis or, are more going to be more research based, are going to appreciate the academic references a little bit more, while more professional programs, law, business, and then, course-based masters in engineering, et cetera, would probably prefer professional references. But more importantly than who, it's what they're going to say and how long they've known you, and what they're going to be able to attest to as to what your abilities are. So you want to have somebody who maybe has a little bit of a flair for narrative, and can highlight your leadership skills and your passion and motivation, and that would be the best person to ask to write your letter.
Yeah, absolutely. Ask someone who knows you really well, and who you think will write a really good letter dedicated to who you are, and why you're unique as an applicant. All right. So those are, some of the questions that were submitted to us prior to this. But we do have many more questions for you that, Teresa and Brenda will be answering. So we're going to start off with some general application questions right off the bat. So the first one is a very simple one. When is the deadline? Great question.
So that is actually going to depend on the country from which you're applying. So you will want to contact the Fulbright Program Office in your country to get the exact deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to vary by country. So that's really important that you're in contact with them. And Teresa, how do I apply and where can I find the link to the application?
Yeah, like Brenda said, it does vary country by country. So keep that in mind. Before you apply, you should absolutely contact the Fulbright Program Office in whatever country you are applying from. But you can find the application link by going to AMIDEAST's website, which would be amideast.org. And at the top bar, you can click on your country. So the drop-down menu will lead you to the country list, select your country, and look for the Fulbright Foreign Student Program. You can also find the link on your country's U.S. Embassy and Consulate website. On the top bar, you'll click on Education and Culture and click on a link about exchange programs. You'll want to look again for the Fulbright Foreign Student Program as you're browsing through the different exchange programs that they offer at your embassy or consulate. One other place that you can search for is always social media. So you can find links to applications by going through Facebook or Instagram. But we typically recommend that you'll go to our website, amideast.org, or the more official embassy or consulate websites.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And what level of English do I need to apply?
So there is no minimum TOEFL score required to apply for the Fulbright program. Graduate study in the United States, though, is usually going to require that you have an IBT of 80. A lot of programs will work with 79, and there are a few that go a little bit lower, but generally speaking, you really need to get at least an 80 to be able to have a good selection of university programs for you to look at. But qualified applicants that don't meet that TOEFL score, they are able to be nominated to participate in a long-term English program that takes place right before the academic year for the cohort you've applied to. So we've had students who have started long-term English this term in January and in March, and hopefully we'll be able to bring their English up enough to where they will still be able to start their studies in August.
Yeah, absolutely. LTE is a great option. So Teresa, what are applicants required to submit?
Yeah, there's a number of elements included within your application. That would include, first of all, your academic transcripts, and we'll generally request that those are translated academic transcript. In some countries, there is the request of TOEFL or IELTS scores that are no older than 2 years old. An up-to-date CV, which details all your prior education and work experience. We'll also ask for 3 letters of recommendation in English, a personal statement, again in English, and that word limit is 600. So 600 words total for the personal statement. And then, if applicable, we would ask for a research proposal, again in English relating to your field of study. This isn't always applicable, but we highly recommend that you go ahead and submit this, as it helps the Fulbright team understand more in depth what you're looking to research during your time in your studies.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that you can provide us that will, give us more of a view of who you are is going to be helpful. All right. So Brenda, how many recommendation letters do I need to submit?
You need to submit 3. And you would submit those with your application, your online Fulbright application. And as mentioned before, they can be supervisors or professors. And you just want to make sure that you find the people who are going to best represent you.
Perfect. And Teresa, how can I register my recommenders?
Yeah, you'll be able to input your recommenders information into the online application. So once you've completed the online reference materials waivers document, then you can go ahead and directly register your recommenders in the online application. You will not see this section though until you have completed that waiver.
Thank you. And Brenda, just a reminder, what language should my recommenders submit letters in?
The recommendation letters need to be in English. They must be written in English.
Yes, thank you. And Teresa, do you have any tips for the application?
Yeah, absolutely. So We often see students waiting till the last minute to work on their application, submit their application. So it's always a good rule of thumb to start early and not wait till the last day. It gives you time to re-look at those essays that you've written and kind of enhance them as you go on. We also recommend that you spend a good amount of time on those personal essays and perfect them and make sure that it really reflects who you are and why you want to participate in the Fulbright program. For first-time applicants, we definitely suggest that you be confident, be willing to share what has been difficult, and give yourself time to understand the application and any questions that you have about it. If the essay is seeming a little intimidating, work on your draft, share it with others, ask for feedback, get comments, edits, and you can continue working through the process. And again, we just highly recommend that you consider why you're applying. That's your personal story is really important to us and helps us understand more about you and why you would be a good fit for the program. Also, always ask questions. You have so many resources for you. You have the Fulbright offices, you have AMIDEAST offices. So if you have any questions or struggles throughout the process, please feel free to ask us questions.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice, especially asking questions. We want you to reach out to whichever Fulbright program office your country operates. So whether it's a commission or embassy or AMIDEAST field office, ask questions for sure. And Brenda, what can I upload under additional documents? So what are some good examples?
Oh, you can upload so many things to the additional documents. A lot of applicants submit certificates that they've received, maybe volunteer experience or even MOOC, massive open online course completion certificates that they've done. Previous university admissions. If you're in the humanities, you might need to submit a writing sample. And all of these things will help strengthen your Fulbright application. You should check with your country's Fulbright Program Office to see if there are specific requirements that need to be uploaded in the additional documents section for your country.
Perfect. All right. And now I'm done with my application. So once I submit my application, how long does it take a Fulbright Commission, AMIDEAST field office, or U.S. Embassy to review applications?
Okay, like we've mentioned a few times, every country is a bit different, but generally we will notify applicants in the fall of your status. The selection process can be quite long, so just keep in mind it's really comprehensive, it's merit-based, and it's a multi-step process. So it may take several months, but that's because we're really taking those applications seriously and giving them the consideration that they deserve. So the local U.S. Embassy, the Fulbright Commission, and the AMIDEAST field office in that country will determine the specific timeline. And again, it's going to differ a bit depending on where you're applying from.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you're looking for a more specific timeline, we definitely recommend you reach out to your specific Fulbright program office for sure. All right. And Brenda, do I need a TOEFL score to apply as a reminder? I'm really worried about this TOEFL score.
Generally speaking, no, it should not affect your application if you don't have a TOEFL score. There are some countries that require that you provide some form of English proficiency. That can be a really old TOEFL or an institutional TOEFL or an IELTS or even Duolingo it works just so that they can kind of get the reason for that requirement. The countries that do require it is just to get a baseline of where you are. So it doesn't matter if it's a really old score, you can go ahead and submit that if it's required, but if it's not required, it should not negatively affect your application at all to not have it on there. There are going to be plenty of places on that application for you to be able to, demonstrate English knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll have a chance if you are selected as a further nominee to take the TOEFL test and if it's required, the GRE. So that will come in the process if you reach that part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And do I need a GRE or GMAT score to apply?
No, you do not need a GRE or a GMAT score to apply. If you are selected to interview and you make it to the next stage as a nominee, then the Fulbright program will cover the cost of you taking the GRE. Again, may differ country to country, but it's not a requirement for your application.
Absolutely. And, should I study? Do you think it's a good idea to study for the GRE and the TOEFL before I submit an application?
I mean, yeah, like, I mean, it's definitely not something that you have to do, but generally speaking, especially depending on what kind of programs you're interested in, you're going to want to give yourself as much time to prepare for these standardized tests as possible so that you can get the highest score in your first go around and, be able to apply to the programs that you want to apply to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always better to start preparing earlier, and to just, get your skills up, before applying for sure. All right, so we have a couple of questions from the audience, that we also received during this time. So Brenda and Teresa, I'm gonna ask you those as well. So is the IELTS acceptable?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Submitting an IELTS is definitely acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to say that, and this varies for different universities, but I know we were talking about a base TOEFL score of 80. I believe usually a base IELTS score of 6 or 6.5 is usually what graduate programs are looking for. So that might, be something to keep in mind. And can the personal statement be more than 650 words?
I imagine if the words are short, it'll probably fit in the bubble, but you really want to make sure that you are following the requirements for the applications. So please don't do that.
Yeah. And a lot of graduate programs really appreciate conciseness as well. So being able to say what you need to say, within, a specific, framework, a specific number of words. So if you can, say what you need to say within the word limit, that's, going to look better, especially for graduate programs. All right. So those are a couple of the questions we received from the audience. At this time, I'm going to pivot, into, some questions about writing and plagiarism, just because I know that, asking questions about your personal statement, writing that personal statement, making sure you're avoiding plagiarism can be a little bit daunting. So why is writing important to the Fulbright application in general? Especially, if I was, an engineer or someone who won't be writing as much perhaps in a graduate program. Why is that still important for the Fulbright application?
So, regardless of what you're studying in the United States, you need to be able to present your work at an academic level, which is an advanced high proficiency level of English. So the Fulbright application really wants to make sure that you are able to meet that standard. If you're going to, because if not, it's going to be very difficult for you to be successful in a master's degree program. Often non-native English speakers speak much better than they write. And so we want to be able to see that you can put together a strong essay to show that you can write at an academic level.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is the personal statement? So what should I include or not include?
Yeah, the personal statement includes a number of elements. So overall, the personal statement should be a narrative statement talking about your achievements and your current goals. It should include some information about your experience, special interests, what your career plans are. and any significant factors that have influenced your educational or professional development. You can hit on the number of years that you've been working in your field, what you've already accomplished within your field, and we would definitely recommend that you highlight those experiences that have prompted some growth within your career development. We'd also love for you to hit on explanations of how your intended plan of study if in the US will impact you personally and professionally, and what are your goals for when you return home?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, setting some goals for when you return home is a really good idea. And what is a study plan or research objective?
So a study plan or research objective is a clear and detailed description of what you plan to study and research. And it's going to explain why you want to pursue this kind of research or why you want to study this topic. You want to be very specific about it, and talk about your specialized interests within the field, and talk about the kind of program you expect to undertake and how a study plan would fit in with your previous training as well as your future plans. And so it is a really essential part of your application and is required, and it is referenced throughout the entire program from beginning to end to make sure that you are meeting your initial objectives. So I can't understate the importance or overstate the importance of this. And when you're doing it, just as a note, don't mention specific US universities at which you'd like to study within that study plan or research objective.
Yeah, being general is also good, in regards to that. All right. And do you have any tips on writing your essays on the application? So any general tips?
Absolutely. So when you're writing your essay, we definitely recommend you start out with a strong structure. So within that, you're going to want to make sure that every paragraph has a clear purpose, and even more specifically, each sentence has a purpose. So what is this argument that you're putting forth? Try to be persuasive with that argument and make sure that you're moving from point A to point B. What do you bring to the table, and how will that help you achieve your goals? You can use topic sentences to help you achieve that, and absolutely a thesis sentence to help you achieve that. And we definitely recommend you to be consistent with your grammar, keep that simple. A couple ways to achieve all of these goals, a tip we definitely recommend is to ask for feedback. If you have friends who enjoy proofreading, ask them to read through your essay and give you feedback on your grammar, on the flow of the essay, on the substance itself, and spelling. We see a lot of spelling mistakes. And then another easy thing is to create a couple drafts. So write it one time and then revisit it. It's okay if you take a couple times, a couple drafts to get through the essay.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure you're just, making drafts and planning out your time. That's really important for sure. All right. So Brenda, what is plagiarism?
Oh, that is a great and very important question, especially when it comes to American academia. So plagiarism is defined as presenting someone else's work as your own. And it's easy to spot, and there's software out there that people use to be able to figure out if you're using other people's ideas, other people's words. And so for that reason, it's unacceptable for the Fulbright application. It's unacceptable for the Fulbright program, and it's unacceptable at American universities. So if you were to plagiarize your any of your essays, anything that you submit, your Fulbright application and any university applications would be terminated. And as I mentioned, there are software programs designed to catch this. So you really want to make sure that you are only submitting your own work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to avoid plagiarism. And Teresa, how can I avoid plagiarism?
There are two easy ways that come to mind. The first would be paraphrasing. If there's, a sentence, a speech, something inspirational that you saw, that you were influenced by, inspired by, you can restate it using your own words, kind of morphing the idea a bit and adding your own spin onto the words. That's applicable. But the issue comes, like when Brenda said, when you're using almost exactly the same words to get the same point across. So if you want to use something similar, just make sure that you're taking that sentence and rephrasing it completely to use your own words. If you do find that those words were particularly powerful, you are more than welcome to cite whatever source it is. So you can put a direct quote into your application. Just make sure that you're giving the person who said that, wrote that, the credit that they deserve, because again, it is their work and they deserve to receive that credit.
Yeah, and I always recommend, if you need to, oversight. Maybe if you're not sure whether something is paraphrasing or you're taking a direct citation from someone, just cite them in your personal statement or in your research and study objective. It's always better to be safe than sorry. And the Fulbright program does have a zero tolerance policy for plagiarism. So it's really important to keep that in mind and just be cautious about that. All right, so we have a couple of more questions that we received in the chat. Thank you all for, submitting what questions that you're interested in hearing the answers to. So I think we have another question about IELTS. So is IELTS required to be accepted for Fulbright and for universities?
Yeah, I can take this one.
Okay.
No, IELTS is not required to be accepted by a university or for the Fulbright program. Like we said, for TOEFL, if you do choose to go the IELTS route rather than taking the TOEFL, once you're applying to universities, yes, then you will need to take whatever test you choose, be that TOEFL, IELTS, and submit those scores. But for the Fulbright application, no, you're not required. Brenda, unless
Oh,
there's
no.
specific...
I was just going to add on top of that. For this part of the process, absolutely. Take the IELTS, submit the IELTS. That's great. However, the IELTS is actually run by the British Council. And so for Fulbright, once you're nominated, you will need to sit for the TOEFL. Because it is the American-based exam. There's a shocking number of graduate programs that actually don't accept the IELTS. And so, go ahead and take the IELTS, submit the IELTS. If you get a better score on the IELTS and then you do on the TOEFL later, you can submit the IELTS to the universities if you want, but eventually you are going to need to sit for the TOEFL.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. All right, this is a great question. So someone is interested in, getting a master's in economics, but they're a primary teacher by profession. So what do you suggest for how they should shape their Fulbright application? You can think for a minute.
I can start and then
Yeah.
Teresa can jump in. Okay, so I think that you would have a very interesting application. You would want to be able to take, what do you plan to do with your economics degree? Do you plan to go back and teach at the primary school? I mean, I don't know. I think I took economics in high school. So I don't know what that option is, or if you plan to branch out and become an economist, or if you want to, if you're thinking about getting your PhD in economics in your home country when you're done. So you just want to be able to focus on what your end goal is going to be. And that should be, I think, enough to explain why you want to do economics. And then but as a teacher, you have a lot of different skills and you have had a lot of different experiences that would also be very interesting to somebody looking at a Fulbright application or somebody looking at a university application. So you're just going to want to be able to find a way to weave those in, but you absolutely can put together a great application with that kind of background and that kind of interest.
Yeah, just to jump off of that, I mean, like we said, your essay is a narrative. So it's telling the story of what you've done with your career thus far and where you see it going. So what brought you to economics? What in your experience as a teacher led you to make this decision to apply to an economics degree? Like Brenda said, that's a really interesting trajectory, and it would be really exciting to read about.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both. All right. The next question we've received is, can I show the personal statement that I've written to someone from the Fulbright program to give me their point of view on it?
I don't know the answer to this question.
So I would say that you should ask your individual Fulbright program office in your country. They probably have been hosting events or maybe are hosting office hours. I know some of our AMIDEAST field offices do that. You can certainly ask. I'm unsure if that might be a conflict of interest. But you can definitely ask and ask your Fulbright point of contact specifically in your home country. They might say no, but they might be able to give you some pointers and general tips and tricks, or to direct you to an office hours session with them, to more specifically talk about your application. So that's what I would say. Teresa, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
I was just thinking, like Olivia said, regarding a conflict of interest, there may be some of the people on staff at the office that you contact that will be conducting the interviews. And so I don't know if they would be allowed to provide feedback on your application in its early phases. And but they may be able to point you to resources or other people who can. So they're always
Yeah.
helpful to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially they can probably definitely provide you with at least resources, for sure. All right. And another question we received. All right, I'm gonna skip over that question. It's not as general. But all right, let me just see if there's any other questions that have come through. Okay, so someone commented that in their country, TOEFL's not available. In that case, what would they do?
At that point, they would take the IELTS or Duolingo or a test that is available and at this stage, again, there's not a TOEFL requirement. So you can submit any form of English proficiency that you have or none at all if it's not required by your country. Once we get past that nomination phase, then we'll figure out what we're doing next insofar as how we're going to demonstrate your English proficiency.
Also, I'm not sure how specifically it's not available within the commenter's country, but we do work with the internet-based tests. So there are various options versus going to a testing center where you can test at home online.
Yeah, and I know in the past, some countries that might not have TOEFL testing centers, we've been able to arrange once you get to the nomination phase, it's been able to be arranged that you go to a different country that has, the nearest country that has a TOEFL testing center. I know we've done that in the past. I'm not sure if that's still an option moving forward, but it could be. So, I wouldn't worry too much about that at this stage. All right. And we received another question. Do you think during this application season, the English score requirement will be waived?
Like for the Fulbright application? Because there already isn't a minimum for the Fulbright application.
Yeah. No, so I think maybe they meant more so for university graduate admissions, perhaps.
I can't imagine that that's actually that would be an option. I don't even think at the height of COVID, universities were waiving the English language proficiency requirement for admission to their university, just because it's such a, I mean, it's the most important part of being able to be successful within a graduate program is having the language skills, to be able to discuss ideas, to be able to understand ideas, to be able to express ideas. So I don't think that there would be a waiver from any university. Depending on what the rest of your scores look like your GPA, things like that, there are different ways that some universities allow you to demonstrate your proficiency. But there's never going to be a situation where they just don't want it.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I've ever seen that before. So yeah, English will be important. So definitely brush up on your English skills as much as you can. And we received another great question. So does having a publication or having been published before give you an edge if you're applying for a master's degree?
I would say so.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it's not going to be the end all be all, but I know when I'm reading through applications and I see somebody like submit something they've published, and they tell me where it's been published, especially if it's something I've heard of, I'm impressed. So I would imagine that admissions committees are going to be impressed too. I mean, they're all just people too, right? So I mean, it definitely won't hurt. So
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like Brenda said, when it comes to the additional documents that you can add, we're really excited to read those. And if you have a well-written published article, I mean, it's impressive.
that's
So,
really, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of graduate programs, especially, if they're more so like research focused, STEM focused, where publishing is really important, that can definitely, at least, be an additional something to add to your application for sure. And you should try to be showing off all of your accomplishments as much as you can. So yeah, definitely. That's a great question. All right. Let me see if we have any more questions that are coming up. In the meantime, I might ask a couple of quick questions. Okay. All right. Sorry, we just got another question from the chat. Thank you everyone who's watching for being so involved. We really appreciate the questions. So they said, thank you for this event. Why do you request GRE scores at this stage? And could it be requested that GRE scores be optional like most American universities?
we don't require them at this stage.
Yeah, and I think like we've been saying, it will depend on your country's program office. So, there might be some countries where that requirement differs. But in terms of the GRE, some universities don't need to see GREs. Some do. It really is going to depend on the university. And you will, if you proceed to the nomination phase, you will have the opportunity to resit for the GRE if you haven't sat for it before. And, at that point, then you'll examine, which programs should we apply for, which are advantageous, which have GRE requirements, which don't. But that is correct. The GRE is becoming optional at a lot of American universities.
It is becoming optional, but if you do get past the application phase and get to the nomination phase, we always get questions about whether or not do I really need to sit down for the GRE, for the GMAT. These 4 universities that I looked at said you don't need it. You will be limiting your pool greatly if you do not sit for the exam. And we don't have to send the score to a university that doesn't require it, but you need to be able to have as many options as possible, and you don't want to limit yourself because you don't want to sit for a test for an afternoon. So if you get to the nomination stage, yes, you will need to take the GRE or the GMAT. Whether or not we will submit those scores, is going to depend on the university list that we wind up with later. But at this juncture, yes. But before that, like right now, no.
Yeah, yeah, great point, Brenda. Is definitely keeping your options open is really important, especially, during the application process for sure. We received a question that seems kind of specific, and thank you for expanding a little bit on what you were talking about before. It's about a secretarial application and university clerkship. I am going to direct you to your Fulbright program office for that question specifically, as they could probably help you with answer the specifics of that question. So I apologize that we can't answer that very specifically right now, but definitely contact either your AMIDEAST field office or the commission or the embassy in the country that you're connecting with us from. So, all right. Well, I think unless we have a couple more questions, I might be. All right. Okay. We received a question. And I think there was another question about GREs. So, for some countries, the GRE is required at the stage with a minimum score. Could it be requested that GRE scores be optional? Again, that is something that is completely up to your Fulbright Commission. So you will want to connect with them directly. Unfortunately, we are not permitted to, set Fulbright or country-specific Fulbright policies. So definitely reach out to the commission of the country that you're coming from. All right. Unless there are other questions, and I see my colleague is currently typing as we speak. I think we're still getting questions in the chat, which is great.
Yay.
Okay, perfect. The question that was just asked is a great one. And Teresa, I think this will be great for you to answer. Can you give more context about what the LTE program is?
Yeah, absolutely. So LTE is our long-term English program. Once you're nominated, all students will be required to sit for the TOEFL exam. And depending on how you score, you may or may not be eligible for the long-term English program. So generally, if you score below that 80 benchmark that we mentioned earlier, you will be eligible for LTE. What that looks like is either an 8-month or a 6-month visit to a US institution for English language programming. So it's pretty intense courses that will be taken either beginning in January through the school year in August, or March until the school year begins in August. You'll be working with other students as well as other Fulbright MENA participants. And it's just a lot of English language training. They're going to be introducing you to higher ed institutions. And we will just work with either 1 or 2 university in the US for LTE.
Yeah, and they're a really nice way if you are nominated and if you do need to still work on your English, it's a really nice way to get your English levels up while also kind of getting an introduction to the US. So it's a great program and a great option for sure. All right. Well, with that, I don't think that we are receiving any more questions in the chat from what my colleague has relayed to me. So I believe we're going to go ahead and wrap up the live. But thank you all, if you are currently watching, for tuning in and asking all of these really important questions. We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much, Brenda and Teresa, for joining us today. And like we said, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to your Fulbright program office in your country. And, I know that some of the application deadlines are coming up, so we wish you the best of luck. And we hope that application season treats you well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.